Now that we've got the engine swaps out of the way, the TDU news, the Hyundai N news out of the way on the channel, and of course I've already put my overarching thoughts for 1.48 out on Thursday, now we can get into actually talking about each of the cars in the following 5 days. And I'm kicking off first of all with the car which pleasantly surprised me the most, the Super GT or GT500 or JGTC, depending on how you want to categorise it, Honda NSX. Year 2000 model, of course super iconic, pretty much any livery of the NSX race car, kind of like any livery of the Supra or the Skyline as well, is going to have its fans, no matter which one you pick, because there were so many of these. Even as recently as Gran Turismo 6, you could represent a ton of different teams, and even though there was some differences between the cars, one of the Supras, for example, the Wudon or Woodone, I'm never sure how to pronounce that name, that one had a big old V8, for example, instead of the other engines, so there were some differences occasionally, but typically you always knew pretty much what you were going to get, and it was pretty evenly matched, even though there was no balance of performance in the game back then. This one though was such a pleasant surprise because of exactly what I said in my first thoughts and impressions video, and that is that I don't have a particularly positive track record with the NSXs in particular, be it the newer shape or the older shape, not the latest shape, which we have in Gran Turismo, which of course wasn't around in GT6, but the basically pop-up headlight generation and the post pop-up headlight, in other words. I never really got on with either of those cars. It definitely had its fans, plenty of people love the NSX, but there was just something about the handling, the balance, which always felt off to me. The mid-engine layout just didn't quite suit my driving style, and I would much more so prefer a front-engine rear-wheel drive option like a Skyline or a Supra. And even then, it's not really that I hate mid-engine cars. I absolutely love prototypes, for example. For me, it was just the NSX, which just felt weird. This one has gone from feeling weird to me to probably being my favourite Super GT car in the game to just drive and enjoy. It's great straight out of the box. In terms of spec, well, first things first, you're looking at 1.5 mil on price, which is pretty competitive against the other two. Of course, if you're watching this close to the time of releasing the video, then you can still buy these in the legendary dealer. So the Pennzoil Skyline, the Castrol Supra, and this one, so you can get that collection book. But even if you wait, it's probably still going to be a similar price, at least I would imagine, for a couple of times where it goes through the rotation. It could change wildly, but I don't see this car necessarily going like to Porsche 911 GT1 levels of crazy, as that one has increased in value quite a bit in the Haggerty collection compared to back when I reviewed it. In terms of point level, that's probably been the thing which I've seen people most positive about with this car. It's not that high. Of course, it's Group 3 instead of Group 2 as the more modern Super GT cars are. Makes total sense. They're more powerful, they're faster, they have significantly better aerodynamics in terms of control, downforce, grip, etc. This one, it's a bit more old. I mean, it's 24 years old at this point, so in racing terms that's like hundreds of years different. And in terms of the spec, 714 points. That's quite low, and that's of course on racing tyres. So you could definitely use this thing for cash cow events at the 700 point level, and as I used it for in career mode, you can pretty easily win 800 point level events as well, especially if you lean out the fuel, use the manual box and short shift. Just the fuel economy alone will allow you to get way out ahead of the AI, despite the fact that it doesn't have as much power as some of them. Now, speaking of power, you're looking at 481 horses. As far as weight, it's unsurprising, 1150 kilos, and of course, mid-engine, rear-wheel drive, and it is a naturally aspirated car. It looks gorgeous, having it for the first time ever in HD glory, and even though we did have a HD NSX before, it was the slightly newer shape, the post pop-up headlight model, which, if I recall correctly, I think there was a base model for as well, or a stealth, something like that, which was a fairly popular car to use. This one though never had a premium model, so it's kind of a big deal to finally have that, especially for Honda and for NSX fans, let alone for people who love GT500 from this era, because now having that mighty trio of the Pennzoil, the Castrol, and now this one as well, it's a pretty awesome three-car lineup. And I will definitely say that thanks to the changes in terms of how the car feels and how it drives, it's gone from being definitely my least liked Super GT car in really any team form, to now it's probably a car I would choose over the Supra or the Skyline. It's that much fun to drive, and it's that great to work with, even without tuning the power up at all. Of course, being a Group 3, you pretty much know what you're going to get. The high-range turbo gives you 788 horses. I'm not a fan of that. I get it with the balance of performance and keeping it fair and blah blah blah, but having this just arbitrary power level across the board, it really doesn't make any sense. I get what they do, it's just, I don't know, it just doesn't come off as being genuine. between the cars. It feels very arbitrary. And of course, completely unsurprisingly, this is by a fair margin the most expensive car out of the 5, and being the only race car here this time around, it does have big boots to fill. Being an NSX on top of that even more so, for those who are completely new to the concept of having this car in Gran Turismo, so in other words if you've been playing since 7 or Sport, I'd be very curious to know what you think of it as being like a brand new vehicle that you haven't tried out before. For those of us who have been playing for a bit longer, you know, GT4, 5, 6 or even earlier where we had more of this kind of thing in there and see it evolve through the PS2 era, still being a standard car and now comparing it to now, I'd really love to see the differences in terms of how people have received it, because I think this is one of those occasions where it might actually be fairly unanimous. I'm sure there are some people who don't like it, but at least so far, and myself included, it seems like quite a positive reception that this car has had, which is great to see. I'm really happy about that, and I certainly wasn't expecting that to be the case. I didn't really have any expectations coming into this car. I assumed it would drive in a fairly similar way to what I remembered, so I probably wouldn't end up using it much. I've already used it more than I have with the Supra and the Skyline in ages. We are still to talk about the other 4 vehicles in the next few days on the channel, so stick around for those reviews, and of course let me know your thoughts on this car below. But I'll see you next time, and for now, thanks for watching.